The story of Jonah from the Bible is not about a man who gets swallowed by a whale. Some of us heard it explained that way in Sunday school, but the story of Jonah has a deeper and far more important message that resonates with many of us in the modern day. And that message is delivered through an engaging narrative that feels like an episode of Game of Thrones. A fugitive prophet, an evil city, a sea monster sent by God, and an ending that forces the audience to ask themselves a deep introspective question. This is How Stories Work with Sherer, and on today's show, I'll explain the story of Jonah. The important part of the story of Jonah is not about him surviving for 3 days inside a whale, which, by the way, might be better translated as large sea creature, or my personal favorite, sea monster. Fixating on whether or not the story of Jonah really happened means sacrificing a far more important conversation about the nature of God, how human beings should interact with one another, and defining justice and mercy. Now, cue the sea monster. The sailors throw Jonah overboard. That's where we hit the classic scene everybody knows. A giant sea monster swallows Jonah whole. Note that it doesn't say whale, and when Jesus refers to Jonah in the Gospel of Matthew, the word that Jesus uses, which is translated from Greek rather than Hebrew, doesn't necessarily mean whale either. The actual words referenced in both stories, translated from Hebrew or Greek, are more accurately translated to great sea creature or even sea monster. The reason I bring this up is that suggesting that the fish or the sea monster is a whale seems to be an attempt to make this element of the story more believable. It's almost as if someone has already determined that the story must be historically accurate in order for it to be meaningful. And since calling it a sea monster or even a great sea creature might make it seem less realistic, some interpreters replace that descriptor with one that seems more realistic to them. Since we're breaking down Jonah as a story without attempting to determine whether or not it actually happened, I have to come to conclusions about altering the narrative in this way. One, changing the term from sea monster to whale doesn't improve the story. In fact, I'm willing to bet that many modern day readers would be far more interested in a story that had a sea monster in it rather than a whale. Two, the story of Jonah isn't even about the sea monster, which means attempting to alter the storyteller's original description might distract from the narrative arc and therefore the entire meaning of the story. In other words, sanitizing the content here doesn't help. Now, I do understand why so many people focus on this aspect of the story. It's definitely a strong marketing tool. There's not another story in the Bible about a sea monster, which makes it instantly memorable. In fact, if Hollywood made a film about the story of Jonah, this scene would be on the poster, a giant sea monster swallowing Jonah whole. It'd be a pretty rad poster, honestly.
A massive creature from the depths of the ocean swallows a fugitive prophet of God. Jonah, starring Leonardo DiCaprio. This summer, stay out of the water.
As a fan of fantasy, I find the addition of the sea monster compelling. But the story of Jonah isn't about the sea monster. In fact, there are only 3 verses that mention the creature. Here's everything that's said about the sea monster. 1, it swallows Jonah. 2, Jonah is in its belly for 3 days and 3 nights. And 3, Jonah prays to the Lord from the sea monster's belly, and then it vomits him up onto the shore. The only description of the sea monster is that it's great, which likely means large, just like with the city of Nineveh. That's it. We don't get any other details. Why? Because that's not where the storyteller wants us to spend our time and attention. I love the story of Jonah and consider it a masterpiece of storytelling. 2 final things. If you want to dig even deeper into the story of Jonah, either for a self-study or a study with a writer's group or a small group, check out my study guide. And don't forget to check out my after show content where I break down the similarities and differences between the story of Jonah and the story of Jesus Christ as it's laid out in the Gospels. It's a little bit mind-blowing, and all of that is available over on Patreon. Links to the after show video and the study guide are in the description down below. Let me know your thoughts on the story of Jonah in the comments. Did I miss anything in explaining the story of Jonah? Do you agree that the story of Jonah is awesome? I'd love to hear your thoughts. Thanks for watching, and I'll see you on the next video.